I'm on set here with me now, Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells. Honestly, the longest question in press conference history there, and we couldn't hear it. So we'll leave that over there. But Scott Morrison, we haven't seen a lot of him since the election. He's obviously deliberately decided to stay out of the day-to-day media spotlight. Do you think the Australian public need to see more of him, especially given others are filling the airwaves with other issues?
Well, look, Chris, we're getting on with business, and I mean, we did win the election, and Scott Morrison is to be congratulated for having won that election, but we did do so because we were able to capitalise on Labor's dud policies and of course franking credits, negative gearing, the assault on the coal industry, and of course that sleeper issue of religious freedom during the election campaign and what happened with Israel Folau. And of course now those quiet Australians who supported us are now expecting us to get on with the job.
Exactly. They want you to get on with the job, especially on the economy, especially job creation, especially on constraining government expenditure, I would argue, those sorts of issues. So but I don't see much of the Prime Minister focusing on those issues. He is today, obviously, on the drought. I think everybody will be pleased to see the Prime Minister out there at Dubbo and focusing on the problems besetting regional areas.
I think that that's a very important issue, and very important for him to be out there, and for the Deputy Prime Minister to be out there, and for other key people to also be out there to look at how we're going to deal with this. And it's such a multi-pronged approach. It's not just about the New Start issue, it's about a whole range of different issues that need to be tackled.
Now, I want to get back to an issue you just mentioned there, and that's religious freedom. You're one of the ones really pushing for the government to address this. We're going to see some legislation sometime reasonably soon, we're told. I'm one of those who's really concerned that we're going to have some unintended consequences here. We've seen the Australian Human Rights Commission, for instance, with racial vilification laws and other discrimination aspects, whether it's age or sex, gender, really overreach in so many cases. What's the protection? What's going to prevent them overreaching when it comes to religious freedom?
Look, Chris, this is a very complex issue, and religious freedom certainly was raised as an issue during the election campaign, and I think particularly with the Israel Folau situation and those quiet Australians that I talked about, many of whom believe in faith and family, now feel, if I go out and quote my Bible, am I going to face some form of trouble? And that's really the discussion at the kitchen table.
I agree, and most people are outraged at what's happened to Israel Folau, but isn't it better just to let the courts deal with that under existing law? Perhaps he'll win, and perhaps therefore the problem will be dispensed with.
Chris, I think the Israel Folau situation is not just an issue in relation to employment law, and there is a body of law that will deal with that accordingly. The broader issue is about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and I've spent a lot of time meeting and consulting with religious leaders over a range of issues over many, many years, and indeed I continue to do that. And in fact, just earlier this week I was at a gathering of key religious leaders that brought together Christian of across different faiths, Muslims from Sunni, Shia, Jews, right across the political spectrum, and for them this is a much broader issue. Leaving aside their theological differences, this is about the protection of freedom of speech and protection of religion within a framework where religion is seen as a positive attribute, not just a grudging exemption to legislation.
Sure, but I'm just worried you're going to have polygamy, child marriages, female genital mutilation,
Chris,
some of these things roped in under religious freedom.
Whatever is done, and let's not forget that we have obligations under international law, and in particular Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And whatever is done has to be within the framework of the law, and that is a very important component of whatever we are going to do.
Now, I was going to ask you about China's expansionism in the Pacific as well, given your former role in that area, but we really are out of time. blame your Prime Minister with his impromptu press conferences, and we'll have you back on again soon to talk about those issues.
Sure, Chris. Happy to do so.
Thanks very much. Concetta Fierravanti-Wells there, Liberal Senator for New South Wales, talking about religious freedom. This is a tricky issue, a very tricky issue that Scott Morrison's going to have to sort out in Parliament over coming months. And I know you've got very, very strong views about that at home as